One of the things that I talk a lot about is how data is an asset and how collecting and using data can be extractive. So, today we're going to talk about ensuring that the data you take is presented in ways that are useful to the community you're serving. And we're going to be joined by two researchers who worked with community members to do just that.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Time with Masterminds.
My name is Peta Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, founder and principal of To Your Growth.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
Good morning. Today, we're going to be talking about how to present data so that it meets the needs of the community. Our guests worked together on a data collection and use project when they worked together at a research organization on a large-scale survey of students in a youth serving coalition in New England. We're going to talk about how they worked with coalition members and community members to make sure that that data really served the community. First, I want to welcome my co-host, Cynthia Rojas. Good morning, Cynthia.
Hi, Peta. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited about today. It's a hot topic.
It really is. Today, we kind of start to get into the nuts and bolts of this.
Yes.
I want to welcome all of our listeners and viewers to Coffee Time. This is a half-hour show with and for leaders of mission-based organizations. If you are joining us live, please let us know your name and where you're joining us from in the comments. And if you're listening to us later around the world, welcome. We're really happy to have you. So today we are joined by Evan Corres and Diana Perez. With experience in higher education, research, and not-for-profit fields, Evan advances social impact work led by coalitions and organizations through evaluation, facilitation, and network building. Good morning, Evan. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Good to be with you both.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Welcome.
Diana joins us. Diana Perez is a quantitative evaluator with international experience in education and international development. She is currently working at the Education Development Center in Waltham, Massachusetts. Good morning. How are you?
Yeah.
But joining us from Peru, not Waltham.
Yeah, hello from Peru.
How awesome. What's the weather like over there?
It is really warm right now. It should be colder, but well,
oh, really?
We're getting crazy now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be talking about a project that you both worked on when you were at MXM. Evan, can you tell us a little bit about that project and what your aims were?
Sure. So this project is implementing the Youth Risk Behavior Survey in a school district in New England that we work with this youth serving coalition. And the Youth Risk Behavior Survey is a really comprehensive survey that was initially developed by the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, to understand youth behaviors and risks that are important for their health and well-being. So the survey asks questions about sexual health, mental health, substance use, drugs and alcohol, relationships with trusted adults, extracurricular activities, just like everything you could possibly want to know in order to support or make decisions about youth through programming, interventions, policies, et cetera. And so our firm supports this coalition in implementing the YRBS, or the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And Diana was the lead on this project in 2021, and I'm now the lead on the project in 2023. So Diana's had the opportunity to work through the full cycle of developing, working with the coalition, implementing, analyzing, presenting the results from the survey. And on my end, we're in the implementation process right now. So I'll be able to talk about parts of what it's been like for me to do this 2 years later. Deanna will be able to talk about what the kind of full life cycle was like. But to the main aims of this is to provide really valued information to the district, to the coalition, to other service providers that really are in some ways really desperate and eager to get this information every year, because they make a lot of like high stakes decisions based on what they learn from how youth are doing in the community.
Mhm. So tell us a little bit about how you engaged those community members and decision makers in the process, both in the implementation and the analysis.
I can respond that part. For example, we work with the coalition from the beginning, like from developing the survey, even reviewing with the community the questions that we are putting in the survey, and sometimes even tested prior that tool with youth that will end up responding. And as a context, also the members of that coalition also work directly with these youth. So they, in these schools specifically, so they know a lot about it and can give us very good observations about how we are writing the questions, so, even with options we should include specifically about race, ethnicity, gender, those. Um, so we also, when we have the preliminary results, we also include the community. We are like in a type of conversation with them. Like, I send you some frequency data that I got. What you can see. Do you have any questions specifically from what you're seeing? And little by little, I go for the analysis. I go back with that analysis and then ask more questions if they need more. And so the participation of them, it is constant, and I think that that approach helps us a lot, specifically how we want to present the data, because
Right.
you already are in the conversation, you are already including them in the conversation, so they are already interested and they are already familiar with what we are asking.
Yeah.
I think that was key.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about disaggregation because, right? So you're in this, you're in this situation that I think is the opposite of what a lot of us experience, which is you have an abundance of data, right?
Mhm.
And you're doing this work in a very diverse region. So your opportunities to disaggregate by race, ethnicity, by gender, right, are kind of overwhelming. Let's talk about why that's important, right? Why did you even have to disaggregate? And then how did you start deciding like how you were going to approach that?
Yeah, disaggregation was also the context. It wasn't the first time that we did this survey with this specific coalition. It comes from years and years, and so we gained some uh, idea of what it is going to be the results. But because one of the missions of this coalition is actually address inequalities, support youth, and we know that mental health, substance use actually change the effects of them, change by race and ethnicity, by gender. So we knew from the beginning that we need to disaggregate the data to understand what is the different effects that they have in different people. And I think it makes it complicated, like disaggregation, as you said, when you have a lot of data, and specifically if you're not familiar with that, where IBS is a long survey, so you do have a lot of data. What to show, how to select what to show. I think I come back to the same thing, like if you don't involve the coalition, in this case, in all the process, then it is difficult even for them to say, oh, what I want from this. Can you present me the questions? If you just include them in the end, it is more difficult for them to catch what they want from this. But if you involve them in the whole process, then little by little they see, okay, oh, we are asking this question, I want to know what is the results. Oh, you're asking about this question, oh, can you give me that information? And I think that it is that's how you choose what to disaggregate and to whom show those disaggregations. Some people want some answer in a specific way, and you actually are responding for what they are asking at the end of all.
Yeah, I think like that last point I want to build on that. Like, I don't think we want to start from disaggregation, but from use or from like the value of what we want to learn. And I'm sorry if my connection's a little bit laggy.
It's okay. We can hear you fine.
Great. So, one example, I know that at some point in between the 2021 implementation, some parents in the community had raised concerns about books in the library that they wanted to ban, following kind of national movements of banning books that were talking about like LGBTQ plus issues, or that were representing the lives of Black and brown authors, etc. And so they brought this to the school committee, and as wanting to support these book bans. And so this coalition kind of in response was like, well, we know that we have data from the YRBS about the mental health risks of students who, or the mental health like state of students who identify as LGBTQ plus. And because now we need to know more about this specific segment of the students, then that's the reason to disaggregate in a really specific way. So not just because we can, but because there's a need to do it. And so this coalition used those results specifically about mental health and substance use for LGBTQ plus youth to argue to the school committee why it was really important to have books that specifically serve those students and can help them feel valued and related to. So I think that's always where the conversation needs to start, which is like, what do we need to learn? What do we need to do? And then do we have information through this survey to help answer it? And usually you do need to disaggregate in order to like provide the answers that inform your programming or your policies. But so I wanted to give an example from Diana's last point, that like the end use should shape and getting that directly from the coalition, from the community, should shape how you are analyzing and disaggregating.
Yeah, that's so key.
I love that. One, because we could get overwhelmed very fast with all the data.
Yeah.
Two, you could end up in a data analysis abyss for a long time if you don't start with the end in mind. And I mean, researchers become researchers because they're curious, right? So we'll be analyzing data forever. But at the end of the day, it has to be useful, which is what Evan is saying. I do have a question out of curiosity. Now, if it's the same survey I'm thinking about, it has about 110 questions, 144 questions. Okay. It is a long survey. And then you said, Diana, that there was opportunity to make some changes.
Yes.
I wonder, how did you convince, or how did the group come around using that survey? Because when I used to work with that survey, people were like, oh no, I am not giving this to individuals. Like, how did you get that far?
I think our relation with the coalition MXM, relation with the coalition is very close. It's very cooperative. In many, not only about providing analysis of data, but we do have participating meetings. We try to help them if they have some indicators that they want to follow with the funders, if they want to find a way to sell what they are doing to find more funds, then we support them. So it is a constant conversation with the coalition. And so when we said, okay, we need to, how we are going to measure this and inform, then we said, okay, we will be very flexible about how we can condition this survey, how we can make it simple for the students. So yeah, it is long, the one that CDC created, but we will reduce it as much as we could. We adapt the questions to what we actually need. So again, you have to build that relation in order to have to make your points about why this is helpful and understand their points of why this could be difficult for the youth to respond.
Yeah.
Still, we have doubts about concerns about how it is, how long it is, the type of questions that they are asking. But knowing who you are, knowing who you are actually asking those questions, who is this youth, and I think it is easier to say, okay, this can be biased in a way because I know who I'm talking to or who I'm referring to in that data.
Yeah. And the orientation, sorry, Evan, go ahead.
I was just going to make it clear that we were brought in because the coalition already was really invested in using this tool to learn and wanted to have more expertise in how to update the questions and how to do more rigorous analysis, et cetera. So this had existed in the district for over a decade before we came in.
Okay.
And I think what makes it worth asking students over 100 questions that are really, that can be extractive and can be really re-traumatizing too, for especially students that have experienced sexual violence. Yeah, very personal. And like where you might be reporting things that are illegal too, that you do, like substance use, et cetera. So it's like a really, it's a lot of weight to do something like this, and for us to be the kind of stewards of this process, like it's a burden on us too, as the ones knowing that we're making it happen, that we're responsible for asking students these really intimate questions. I think what makes the process worthwhile is the amount of buy-in, knowing the end use, and that I think especially from students that they want to ensure that their experiences are represented in the information that people who make decisions about them have. And so, this year when I met with 2 different student groups to review some of the survey updates. And, I'll just share like one example was a question about, the question was aimed to learn about like hostility, like, and verbal hostility towards like certain protected groups or different demographic groups. And the original CDC question asked about like, how often have you heard, mean or derogatory remarks about, and then gave like examples of 2 groups. I think it was like LGBT and racial or ethnic minority groups. And the students that I was talking with were like, we want to know about more than just those 2 groups. Like, what about students who are poor? What about students who are neurodivergent? Like, we hear remarks about those 2 groups too, and we want to make sure that that we have a chance to tell you how these students, like how often we hear these remarks. And we don't only hear these from other students, sometimes we hear these from teachers. So can you please update the language so it says, how often do you hear these remarks from anyone? Right? So it's like the students care that their experiences are represented. And because of that, they're like eager to contribute to the process and for the, and for like, when they're taking the survey, they're gonna be like, yeah, here's what's happening. I want you to know. Yeah. And so that, I think this is a burdensome process for the students, but I think when they feel like they're being able to share really valuable things that they want people to know about, then they're like invested in making it happen.
Wow. And this is, Peter talks about this all the time, including those that you were surveying or getting information from in the process from the very beginning. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's extraordinary that the young people came back and said, oh, no. We actually want to hear about other subgroups, and we want you to include what we hear from our teachers and other groups. Yeah. I love this.
Yeah. I mean, that point, I think we can't like articulate this too many times, but starting with the questions, right? Starting with like, what decisions are we going to be able to make with this data is so important, right? We've talked a lot about how, the trap of it would be nice to know and just, randomly adding things onto a survey because you can, and how, at best it's a waste of time and resources, not your time, your respondents' time. But at worst, it's a misuse of your power as the person who writes and distributes the survey, right? To just take data because it, satisfies your curiosity, but you don't have a responsible use. You don't have a way that you're going to use this data to make things better for that group. So, Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Because
what was-
normally,
yeah.
sorry. No, but it is, you normally are attentive, right? Because those type of conversation, again, build that relation. Is actually, it takes time, and even for the process of creating the survey, it can take you like go back and forth about what you want to include, not include. It extends the time of how much you work for this to happen. So, but I think it is totally worth it in the sense that at the end of all, the data that you get, it will have more meaning. It will better communicate it with them to them. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, we talked a couple of weeks ago about surveys and how everybody has survey fatigue, like just doesn't want to do it anymore, right? And I attribute that partly to the fact that the technology has made it so easy to do surveys that there's one like everywhere you look, right? And people are just tired of it.
yeah, no, and for example, for this coalition, as I said, in the coalition, you have participation of youth lead. And what we did, it was when we said, oh, the survey will come next week. So this youth lead went to their peers saying, oh, how important it is this. We even did a video for the youth lead to say why we were doing this survey, what we want to obtain with this, how we are going to use it. It's just to communicate those people who will respond to the survey why we are doing it. I think that was key too.
Yeah. One of the questions I have is a problem that I'm struggling with, in that when people want to change surveys, you get a lot of opinions, right? And I was very recently with an organization where someone doesn't like the like it scale that says, does not agree, sometimes agree, very agreed, disagreed, all those agrees. And then I thought, okay, so I'll put a 1 to 5 and you decide the weight of all of those. And then another person said, no, I don't like ratings of 1 to 5 if they don't have a label on them, because and then I don't know what's the difference between 3 and 4. And nobody likes neutral. And I just wonder, from a technical standpoint, it is one of the drawbacks of bringing people together, right?
Crowdsourcing surveys.
Yeah, you get a lot of opinions. And I just wonder, how do you manage, especially the comments about I don't like, when you know from a quantitative perspective, there is a real reason for the like it scale.
Evans, maybe you have more a fresh idea now.
Evan, you're it.
Yeah.
You're it.
Yeah, it's super hard. I want to make sure I have something useful to say besides just agreeing with you. I think I'd say there's maybe 2 parts to the process. One is that you are focusing the kind of input on how you're asking questions, on like focusing that on the utility and on the use. So like, okay, sure, you don't like Likert scale, but what do we actually need to learn from this question, and can we ensure that we learn it? Maybe you might not like Likert scale, but it's going to be the best way for us to learn it. And as the survey researcher or the technical person, then I can try to convince you of that, or just say, trust me, I know you want to learn this data. I'm telling you this is the best way. Like the mechanics of this question might be known, but this is going to be the best way. And reminding people that like what we ultimately care about is a signal. And so you ask 100 people a question, some of them are going to interpret a little bit differently, but overall across the 100 of them, you'll still get a general sense of like where people lean, or like what some of the differences are. So I might judge 4 and 5 differently, but overall, right, I'm still on that end of the spectrum. So like aside from the mechanics of it, like focusing on the end use can help, gather people around a common goal. And then it's important to have those kinds of bringing those perspectives together that may that have the real disagreements about what you want to learn. And so I'll give an example that was powerful to me and was humbling. I was talking to one coalition member about a survey question that asked about how many sexual partners students have had. And they had shared a concern that this question, has a kind of a normative assumption to it that having more than one sexual partner is like bad, right? And it's like there's a slut shaming component to that if you say you slept with multiple people. And so you might either feel bad about answering that question, or you might like feel uncomfortable that you were asked, or lie about it because you know there is a social norm about sexual partners, right? And so they were encouraging me to remove the question completely because they felt like it was doing more harm than it was good for learning. You know, a few weeks later, so we put it on the list of questions we might consider removing. A few weeks later, I was talking to another coalition member who was looking at that question saying, oh, I'm so glad you're asking this. This is a major risk factor for HIV and other sexually transmitted infections.
Yes.
And so, you know, and they were not concerned about the norming and the kind of the harm from it because it was so valuable for them to get that information. And if I had only asked one of those, then I wouldn't have both of those perspectives to weigh on the question. And so, you know, that I think those are the types of disagreements about survey questions that are really valuable. And it's not about, you know, the logistics of the question, but like what do we really need to learn, and what are we going to do with this?
And why?
And
yeah. And what's the risk
ultimately,
of not knowing this? Yeah.
yeah. And so that when you weigh
Yeah.
those two things together, you should absolutely ask that question because the benefit of being able to inform like STI prevention and support is worth it than the discomfort students might feel from being asked about that.
Yes. Yes.
So great. So what advice would you give somebody, right? Yeah, even on a much smaller scale project, but what advice would you give somebody who was undertaking something like this, right? We are going to work with different community members who have different relationships with a project and different learning goals, and we're going to gather some information and then we're going to present it. Where do they start, or what are some important things for them to consider?
I think to know what is their relation with the people that he's or who you are going to collect the data. I think it is important to learn a lot of them, a lot of information from them. What you will be able to interpret from the data will be related with that, how much knowledge you have from these people. If you have any allies inside of those people who actually it is important. If it's youth, for example, if you have teachers allies that are there that you can actually, they can support you or give you feedback about it. I think it is important to bring them to the conversation or to the project, to the process.
Allies are important.
It is.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And just to give people a scale, like how much time should you allow yourself before the survey even goes out for this kind of a process, right? Because I think I've had plenty of calls where people say, like, we want to send out this survey next week, right? And as the consultant, I have to tell them, like, I can't help you with that. That process is not going to work. So how would you say, like, how can we estimate how much time we need to prepare to really do a quality thought process and preparation on something like this?
I mean, I'm pulling up my budget right now to tell you how much time I spent on the survey preparation process, but it takes the simple answer, it takes way more than you'd think. I don't know, triple it at least. But and so actually my hours are probably not going to be that useful because this is 100+ question survey and all these details. But hours and hours and hours total of going back and forth between different constituencies on it. But it's so not just the time of the people implementing it too, but also the time of the people supporting the coalition members, the students. Like that time also really needs to be valued. Sending it to an assistant principal or to the director of athletics to review a few questions, like that's really valuable time on their end too. And you have to approach that with a certain amount of humility too, and grace, and asking people for that. So build in a lot of time for yourself, more than you'd expect if you want to do this rigorously with equity in mind, and appreciate the time of the people you're asking for their guidance and wisdom, because that's really valuable too.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
That's awesome.
Diana and Evan, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been incredibly helpful.
Oh my God, so helpful. So helpful.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Yeah.